It was a normal day for Emily Dawson. The sun shone brightly in the clear blue sky, casting a warm glow over everything in sight. She slowly made her way down the street with her cane, feeling the smooth pavement beneath her feet. Her guide dog, Rex, walked confidently beside her, leading the way. He was an impressive dog, with a thick coat of golden fur that shone in the sunlight. His eyes, always alert and watchful, never missed a beat as he helped guide Emily through the world around her. To the casual observer, Emily seemed like just another woman with a disability. She was walking slowly, carefully, making her way along the sidewalk as people passed by, going about their own business. Some people might have looked at her and thought that she needed help. Some might have even felt sorry for her. But Emily didn't need pity. She had learned long ago to live her life on her own terms. Rex had been by her side for years, and together they had built a quiet, simple life. He wasn't just a dog to her, he was her best friend, her protector, and her partner. He had been trained to guide her through every day, but there was more to Rex than just that. He had a past, a story that not many people knew. Rex wasn't just any guide dog. He had once been a military dog, a canine hero with a special mission, one that had saved countless lives. His training had been tough, his experiences even tougher, but through it all, Rex had never faltered. And neither had Emily. As she walked down the street, Emily was lost in her thoughts. She didn't notice the group of bikers who had parked their motorcycles on the corner. The sound of their bikes revving up earlier had caught her attention, but she hadn't thought much of it. There was always some noise in the city. But today, something felt different. The bikers, a loud and rowdy group, were watching her. They didn't know who Emily was, or who Rex was. All they saw was a woman with a cane, walking slowly down the street, her dog guiding her. They thought she was weak, just another person to be mocked. And that's exactly what they planned to do. Jack, the leader of the bikers, stood leaning against his bike, his arms crossed. He looked over at his friends with a smirk on his face. "Watch this," he muttered. "Let's have some fun." The other bikers chuckled and nodded, ready to go along with whatever Jack had planned. They had no idea who Emily was or the strength she had inside of her. They didn't know the bond she shared with Rex, the dog who had been through so much. They didn't know what Rex was capable of. But Emily felt their eyes on her. She could hear the low murmur of their voices, the laughter. It was the same kind of thing she had experienced many times before. People who thought they were better than her, who saw her disability and thought that meant she was weak. They didn't understand that her strength wasn't visible. They didn't see that her strength came from the heart, from the love and trust she had in Rex. Rex, sensing her tension, slowed his pace and turned his head slightly, his ears alert. He was ready, as always, to protect Emily. He had always been there for her, guiding her through the ups and downs of life. But today, things were different. Today, they were being watched. As Emily continued walking, the bikers began to move. Jack stepped forward, blocking her path. His large figure loomed over her, casting a shadow on the ground. He grinned, a smirk that oozed with arrogance. "Hey, sweetheart," he called out in a taunting voice. "Need some help with that cane?" Emily paused for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she let Rex take the lead. The dog stood tall, his posture stiff, eyes locked on Jack. Emily could feel the tension in the air, but she refused to show fear. She had learned long ago that fear only made things worse. She knew Rex would handle the situation if it came to that. Jack's smirk widened as he noticed the dog's stance. "Oh, what's this? The dog's gonna protect you now," he sneered, stepping closer. "What's he gonna do, bark at me? Is that your big defense?" The other bikers laughed loudly, clearly enjoying the scene. They didn't know that Rex had been trained for much more than barking. He had been trained to be a protector, to defend those who needed him, no matter the cost. Emily stood still, her hand gently resting on Rex's back. She knew the situation could escalate quickly, but she also knew that Rex wouldn't let anything happen to her. He was always there, watching over her. "What's the matter, blind lady? Can't see us?" Jack taunted, taking another step forward. He was trying to provoke her, to get a reaction. He thought he had the upper hand. But he didn't know who he was messing with. Rex growled low in his throat, a warning that sent a chill down Jack's spine. The dog's eyes were focused, unblinking. Jack took a step back, his smile faltering for just a second. But then he shrugged it off and laughed. "What's he gonna do? Bite me," he said, turning to his friends. "This dog is nothing." But Rex wasn't nothing. Rex had seen things, done things that these bikers could never imagine. He had been part of something much bigger than the street corner, something that would make these bikers' reckless behavior seem small and insignificant. Emily could feel Rex's tension, his muscles coiled, ready to spring into action if necessary. She gave a small nod, signaling to him that she was okay for now. Rex's growl softened, but he didn't move. He was waiting for Emily's command. The bikers seemed to think they were in control, that they could intimidate this blind woman and her dog. But they had no idea that they were about to face something they couldn't handle. As Emily and Rex continued walking, the bikers followed them for a few steps, egging them on. But the tension in the air was thick, and it wouldn't take much for everything to boil over. What the bikers didn't know was that today would be the day they would learn just how wrong they were. They didn't know who they were dealing with. They didn't know that Rex, the guide dog they thought was harmless, was a trained military hero. And they certainly didn't know what Emily was capable of when she was pushed to the limit. As they continued down the street, the bikers stayed close, ready to make their move. But Emily could feel that something was coming. She didn't know what, but she knew things were about to change. She could feel Rex's steady breathing beside her, and she knew that whatever happened next, she wouldn't be alone. Emily had always been overlooked. It wasn't new to her. She had lived with blindness for most of her life. She had learned to navigate a world that didn't always accommodate her needs, a world that sometimes seemed too fast, too indifferent. Whether it was the supermarket clerk who gave her a cold stare when she asked for help reaching something on a shelf, or the passerby who didn't even bother to offer assistance when she was clearly struggling to find her way down the street, Emily had grown used to the subtle discomfort of being ignored or underestimated. To most people, she was just another blind woman, nothing special, just someone to be avoided or forgotten. But today felt different. As she made her way down the street, walking slowly with her cane tapping the ground in front of her, Emily noticed a strange buzz in the air. It wasn't the usual hum of city traffic or the clattering of busy pedestrians. There was something more. Something loud. Something unsettling. She paused for a moment, sensing the noise coming from the corner ahead. The rumbling sound of motorcycles revving filled the air, sending vibrations through the pavement beneath her feet. It wasn't a sound she was used to hearing in her everyday walk. Emily's first instinct was to stay alert. She trusted her senses, even though she couldn't see the motorcycles or the people standing by them. Rex, her faithful guide dog, slowed his pace and gave a quiet, almost imperceptible growl. It was the kind of growl that made Emily's heart race just a little bit faster. She knew that Rex was a well-trained military dog, calm under most circumstances, but always alert when something felt off. Emily reached down and patted him gently, offering a quiet word of comfort. "It's okay, Rex," she whispered. "Let's just keep going." But as she continued, Emily could feel the tension in the air. She could sense the eyes of the bikers on her. It wasn't the normal attention she was used to receiving. This felt different, heavier, as though something was about to happen. She didn't know exactly what it was, but the instinct she had developed over the years, the way she had learned to trust her senses, told her this wasn't just another normal day. She heard the sound of footsteps approaching, quick and heavy, as if someone was deliberately stepping into her path. It was then that she heard a voice, loud and mocking, cutting through the hum of the motorcycles. "You need help, sweetheart." The voice was deep and thick, filled with a tone of arrogance and amusement. Emily's hand tightened around the handle of her cane, her fingers brushing the smooth surface of the metal as if it could offer some extra strength in the moment. She didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. She knew who was speaking. Jack. Jack was the leader of the group of bikers. He had been the first to speak when they had all parked their motorcycles on the corner. He was burly, with a thick beard and a leather jacket that seemed too tight for his large frame. Emily could hear the laughter of his friends in the background, their voices loud and careless. She had learned to ignore people like Jack. People who thought they were better because of their loud voices or their flashy bikes or their rude jokes. But this time, there was something about the way he spoke that made her pulse quicken. Maybe it was the tone, or maybe it was the way he had stepped right into her path, as if daring her to respond. But Emily wasn't about to let him get to her. Not today. Not when she had Rex by her side. Rex growled again, this time louder, more intense. His muscles tensed as if he was ready to spring into action at any moment. Emily could feel the dog's body vibrating with the energy of his protective instincts. She could almost hear his thoughts, "Don't worry, Emily. I've got this." Jack's smirk grew wider as he noticed Rex's reaction. He took a step closer, clearly testing Emily's nerves. "What's the dog gonna do? Bite me?" he taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. "You think a blind woman and her dog are a threat?" The other bikers laughed even louder now, their voices a mix of amusement and derision. Emily could hear them shifting on their bikes, revving the engines in an attempt to add to the chaos. But Emily wasn't intimidated. She had been underestimated her whole life. And she had learned to stand her ground, even when no one could see the strength inside her. She had learned to fight with everything she had, even if it was just through the power of her calm, unshakable presence. She gripped her cane tighter, steadying herself. "I don't need help," she said calmly, her voice cutting through the noise. "I'm fine, thank you." But Jack wasn't done. He took another step forward, his boots hitting the pavement with a thud. Emily could feel the vibrations of his footsteps, could hear the challenge in his voice. "Oh, I bet you're fine," he sneered. "Just a blind woman with a dog. What's the dog gonna do, guide you to safety?" "Huh." Rex's growl grew deeper, a low rumble that vibrated through the air. Emily could feel the dog's readiness to protect her, his body stiff with tension. She knew he would do anything to keep her safe. Rex had been through so much: his training, his experiences in the military, and his bond with her. He was more than just a dog. He was a hero in his own right. But Jack wasn't backing down. He was too drunk on his own sense of power, too convinced that he could push Emily around. He was used to people cowering before him, used to intimidating those weaker than him. But today, he had met his match. He just didn't know it yet. "Hey, buddy," Jack called to one of his friends, a biker with a long black beard and tattoos covering his arms. "How about we give this blind woman a little lesson in reality?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the way the bikers were positioning themselves. It wasn't just Jack anymore. Now, they were all involved. It was becoming clear that they weren't just messing with her. They were trying to break her down, to make her feel small, to prove something to themselves and each other. But Emily didn't back down. She stood tall, even though no one could see it. She had Rex by her side, and that was enough. She trusted him with her life. She had learned to trust herself, too. She took a deep breath, pushing away the rising panic in her chest. I said, "I'm fine. You should leave me alone." Jack's smirk faltered for a moment. He hadn't expected Emily to speak with such firmness. He had expected her to cower, to apologize, to back away. But Emily wasn't backing down. And that, more than anything, seemed to throw him off balance. He took a step back, sizing her up, his eyes narrowing. "I think you're lying," he said slowly. "I think you're afraid. Afraid of me, afraid of us. But don't worry. We're not gonna hurt you. Just have a little fun." Rex's growl turned into a bark, sharp and commanding. It was clear that the dog wasn't going to tolerate Jack's threats any longer. But Emily wasn't sure how far this would go. She didn't want trouble. She just wanted to get home, to be left alone. But the situation was escalating fast, and she wasn't sure if she could talk her way out of it this time. Jack's friends were laughing again, egging him on. They thought it was all just a game. But for Emily, this was no game. This was her life. And she wasn't about to let anyone bike her or not make her feel less than what she was. "I said, leave me alone," Emily repeated, this time with more strength in her voice. Jack paused for a moment, clearly surprised at her defiance. But instead of backing off, he took another step forward, this time coming right up to Emily and her dog. "You really think you can tell me what to do?" he asked, his voice dripping with scorn. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. She couldn't back down now. Not when Rex was ready to defend her, not when these bikers were so eager to push her to the edge. She wasn't going to let them win. The tension in the air grew thicker, and Emily's heart began to race, though her body remained still. She had been in situations before where things were uncomfortable, where people underestimated her. It wasn't new. The world often saw her as someone to pity. They thought because she couldn't see, she couldn't be strong. But they were wrong. She wasn't just a blind woman with a cane. She was someone who had learned to live in a world that often seemed cold and indifferent. She had learned to trust her senses, her instincts, and the most important thing, Rex. Jack, the biker who stood in front of her now, was trying to make her feel small. He thought he could intimidate her, thought he could make her afraid. But Emily wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She knew what Rex was capable of. She had seen the courage in his eyes, heard the quiet but steady growl that only came out when he sensed danger. She knew that if things went wrong, if this situation escalated, Rex would be ready to protect her. But she also knew she didn't want it to come to that. She didn't want to fight. She wanted to walk away, to go home. But Jack wasn't going to make it easy for her. He took a step forward, blocking her path completely. Emily felt the shift in the air, the space around her narrowing as Jack closed the distance. She could almost hear the smug smile on his face as he sneered at her. "What's a blind woman like you doing out here all alone?" he taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. The bikers behind him laughed, their laughter echoing in the street. The sound was loud, but it didn't shake Emily. She had faced far worse in her life. She didn't need their approval, their pity, or their insults. She didn't even need to answer him. Her silence spoke louder than any words she could have said. Rex stood by her side, unflinching. He wasn't just any dog. He was trained in ways most people could never understand. Rex had seen things, done things that most people couldn't even imagine. Emily had seen it in his eyes when they were out on walks, his calm, steady demeanor that seemed to exude a quiet strength. But she also knew what lay beneath that calm. Rex had been a military dog, trained to protect, to respond to danger. He had been through the horrors of war, the heat of battle, the chaos of life or death situations. And now, he was standing by her, ready to protect her if she needed him. Jack didn't know any of this. He didn't know that the woman he was mocking had a former military hero standing by her side. He didn't know that every time he taunted her, every time he stepped closer, he was pushing the limits of his own safety. Rex wasn't just any dog. He was trained to recognize threats, to respond in ways that were swift, precise, and unforgiving. Emily knew this. She trusted him. But even though she felt the power of Rex's training, Emily knew that today, she needed to remain calm. She couldn't let Jack or his friends see fear in her. She couldn't let them see that their words were starting to make her blood boil, starting to get under her skin. She had learned long ago that the best way to face fear was with calm, with silence, with confidence. "Move," Jack demanded, his voice now more forceful, but still laced with mockery. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She stayed right where she was. She wasn't moving. She had every right to be where she was, and she wasn't about to let anyone tell her otherwise. "I'm not moving," she said quietly, her voice strong and steady. Rex growled again, a low rumble that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. She could feel the tension building in his body, the readiness to act if things went wrong. She knew that Rex would never attack without her command. But if Jack made a wrong move, if he tried to hurt her, Rex would protect her, without hesitation. She didn't need to say a word. Rex would know what to do. Jack was now just inches away from Emily, towering over her, trying to intimidate her with his presence. He didn't know the strength she carried within her, didn't know the courage she had gained from years of fighting for her place in a world that often ignored her. He didn't know the bond she shared with Rex, the bond that had been forged through years of mutual trust and respect. "Think you're tough, huh?" Jack sneered. "Think you can just walk away?" Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. But Rex was getting more tense by the second. Emily could feel the muscles in his body tightening, could hear his breath quickening as he stood ready, watching Jack's every move. Emily knew that Rex's training was kicking in now. He was assessing the situation, waiting for any sign of danger. He was prepared to act at any moment. Jack must have sensed the shift, must have felt the tension in the air. He looked down at Rex, and for the first time, his expression faltered. He seemed to hesitate, unsure whether he should press further. But then, one of Jack's friends spoke up, trying to break the moment. "Jack, come on. Let's just leave her alone," one of the bikers called out, his voice rough but not as hostile as Jack's. "She's just a blind woman with a dog. What's the point?" Jack shot him a quick glare, but the other bikers didn't seem as eager to continue the confrontation. Emily could feel their eyes on her, and she knew they were starting to realize that this wasn't a fight they wanted. Jack, however, wasn't ready to back down yet. "You think I'm afraid of a dog?" Jack spat, his voice dripping with venom. He took another step forward, closer to Rex. Emily's grip on her cane tightened. She was ready. She wasn't afraid of Jack or his friends. But she knew now was the moment where she had to act carefully. She couldn't let things spiral out of control. She had learned through years of experience how to read a room, how to sense when things were about to shift, when things were about to go from bad to worse. It was then that Emily heard something that made her heart skip a beat: Rex's sharp bark. It wasn't a playful bark, or a bark meant to get attention. This was a warning. A low, deep bark that sent a chill down Emily's spine. Rex had seen enough. He knew Jack wasn't backing off, and he was ready to protect Emily at all costs. "Stop!" Emily commanded, her voice firm, her hand resting on Rex's head. She knew that if she didn't calm him now, things could escalate very quickly. Jack froze, his hands still hovering near Rex. The tension in the air was palpable, but for a moment, everything stood still. It was as if time itself had paused, waiting to see what would happen next. Emily knew that her calmness, her confidence, was the only thing that could stop the situation from spiraling out of control. She breathed deeply, steadying herself. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't just a blind woman with a cane. She had fought too hard to get where she was to let some ignorant biker ruin her day, ruin her peace. The tension in the air was thick. Jack, the leader of the biker gang, had pushed Emily's shoulder hard. She had felt the force of it, but she didn't move. She couldn't afford to show weakness. Rex, her guide dog, was not so calm. The moment Jack made contact with Emily, Rex barked loudly, his sharp sound cutting through the thick air. His body tensed, muscles firming as he stood between Emily and Jack. The bikers, used to pushing people around, took a step back. They didn't know what to make of this sudden change. Jack, still trying to maintain control of the situation, glanced down at Rex, who was now standing with his fur bristling, eyes locked on Jack. The dog's growl rumbled in the street, a deep, protective sound that was both a warning and a promise. Rex was no ordinary dog. Emily knew that. The bikers didn't. They had underestimated her and Rex, and now they were beginning to realize their mistake. Jack's bravado faltered for just a second. His confidence was beginning to crumble under the weight of Rex's powerful presence. The other bikers, once so loud and aggressive, began to look unsure. One of them stepped back nervously. The silence between them was heavy, but Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. Rex was doing all the talking for her now. Then, in the quiet of the standoff, Emily's phone suddenly rang. The sound of the phone was sharp and unexpected. It was a loud, clear break in the tension. She pulled the phone out of her pocket, still keeping her eyes fixed on Jack, never breaking her composure. The voice on the other end was calm, direct, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "Ma'am, we have confirmed that you're not alone. We've got eyes on the situation. Stand firm. We've got your back." Emily's heart raced. It was a voice she recognized, one she hadn't heard in a long time. This wasn't just any phone call. The words meant something. They were a signal. The bikers had no idea who they were dealing with. Jack, who had thought he could push Emily around, was now standing on the edge of something much bigger than he could imagine. Emily felt a surge of confidence as she listened to the voice on the other end. She didn't speak, not yet. She just held the phone close, feeling the strength of the words sink in. The bikers were still confused, still sizing up Rex. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know what he had been through, what he was trained to do. And now, Emily knew that the time had come for the bikers to learn the truth. She waited a beat, letting the words from the phone sink into the air around her. Jack was still staring down at Rex, unsure whether to back off or escalate the situation. He was used to being the big guy in these kinds of encounters. But today was different. He wasn't just facing Emily and her cane. He was facing Rex, and Rex was far more than just a guide dog. Emily raised her hand slowly, signaling Rex to calm down. The dog, still tense, relaxed just a little. She could feel the change in the air. She knew now was the time to reveal who Rex really was. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to explain everything. The bikers would learn quickly enough. "Rex isn't just any dog," Emily said quietly, her voice steady. "He's a retired military canine." The bikers froze. The words hit them like a slap in the face. Jack's face shifted, his arrogance replaced by a mixture of confusion and wariness. He took a step back, looking at Rex, who had now fully relaxed but still stood tall and ready. The other bikers exchanged nervous glances, realizing that they might have bitten off more than they could chew. Emily knew that this revelation was the turning point. The bikers, who had thought they could intimidate her, now understood that they had underestimated her and Rex in the worst way. Jack opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, he didn't know how to respond. Emily took a step forward, her confidence growing with every second. Rex has been trained to protect. He's saved lives before. And if you make the wrong move, he'll do it again. The words were simple, but the power behind them was undeniable. The bikers were now fully aware of the truth. They were standing in front of a trained military dog, one who had been through the toughest situations imaginable. And he wasn't here for fun. He wasn't here to play. Rex was here to protect his handler, Emily, and he would do whatever it took to ensure she was safe. Jack, still standing a few feet away from Rex, swallowed hard. His bravado was gone. He looked down at the dog, then back up at Emily. He seemed to weigh his options, but deep down, he knew he was outmatched. The power of Rex's reputation, combined with Emily's calm authority, made it clear that they were not people to be messed with. One of the bikers behind Jack spoke up. "Maybe we should just leave. This isn't worth it." Jack turned around, a brief flash of anger on his face. He wanted to argue, to push back, but something held him back. Maybe it was the way Rex was standing, or the cool confidence Emily exuded. Or maybe it was the realization that they had stepped into something much bigger than they had expected. Emily, still standing tall and calm, kept her eyes fixed on Jack. "You have a choice," she said softly. "You can walk away, or you can make things worse for yourselves." There was a long pause. The bikers shifted uneasily, unsure of what to do next. Emily stood firm, her heart still racing, but her mind calm. Rex stayed at her side, his presence a silent promise that he would protect her, no matter what. Finally, Jack seemed to give in. He looked at his gang, then back at Emily and Rex, and sighed. "Let's go. This isn't worth it." Without another word, Jack and his gang turned away, slowly walking back toward their motorcycles. The tension that had filled the street began to dissipate, leaving behind a quiet calm. Emily stood still, watching as the bikers mounted their bikes and roared off down the street. She could feel the adrenaline still pumping in her veins, but she didn't move. She knew she had won this battle, not through force, but through the quiet strength that came from knowing who she was and who stood with her. As the sound of the motorcycles faded into the distance, Emily exhaled slowly. She turned to Rex, who was still by her side, his eyes calm now, but still alert. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. Just as the tension between Emily, Rex, and the bikers reached its peak, something changed in the air. A distant sound, faint at first, grew louder. The rumble of engines was approaching. The bikers, who had been so sure of themselves moments before, began to look uneasy. They had been focused on Emily and Rex, but now, something was shifting. Emily stood still, her senses heightened. She could hear the sounds of engines growing louder, but she didn't show fear. Rex, sensing the change in the atmosphere, calmed down just a little, though he still stood strong at her side. Emily's grip on her cane tightened, but her eyes never left the bikers. Jack, who had been staring at Rex, turned toward the sound of the approaching vehicles. His eyes narrowed, and his mouth tightened. The bikers began to shuffle uneasily, clearly unsure of what to do next. They were no longer the only ones in control of the situation. And then, the first police cruiser came into view, its lights flashing. It was followed by another, and then another. Within moments, a squad of police cruisers had rolled into the street, their sirens blaring, red and blue lights flashing in every direction. The bikers looked around, realizing that they were now surrounded. Their bravado, which had once been so strong, started to fade. They weren't used to being on the receiving end of such an overwhelming presence. Jack, the leader, looked around in panic. His eyes darted from the police cars to Emily and Rex, trying to figure out his next move. But he was already too late. The officers had been tracking the situation for a while now, ever since Rex's former military handler had noticed the biker's behavior and reported it. The officers had been waiting for the right moment to step in, and now was that moment. The sound of the police cruisers stopping was followed by the officers quickly getting out of their cars. They moved with purpose, their hands on their belts, ready for action. The bikers, now realizing they were outnumbered and out of their depth, began to back away. Jack's arrogance crumbled as he saw the officers moving toward him. He had been the one pushing Emily around, the one making all the threats, but now, he was the one who was in trouble. His friends, once so eager to back him up, were starting to look nervous. The leader, once so confident, was now beginning to show the first signs of fear. The officers moved quickly. One of them approached Jack, and before he could even speak, the officer grabbed him by the arm and spun him around. With quick precision, Jack's hands were placed behind his back, and handcuffs were locked into place. He let out a frustrated grunt, but there was nothing he could do. The situation had completely changed. One of the officers turned to the rest of the bikers. "Everyone step away from the woman and her dog." "Now," the officer commanded, his voice firm. The bikers, realizing they had no choice, took a few steps back. They were now at the mercy of the law, and they knew it. Emily didn't move. She stayed where she was, standing tall, with Rex by her side. The scene had shifted completely, and she knew it. The bikers had underestimated her. They had thought she was weak because of her blindness, but they had no idea who they were really dealing with. They had no idea who Rex was, and now, they were going to pay the price for it. As the officer finished handcuffing Jack, he turned to Emily. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice softening. Emily nodded, though she didn't speak at first. She was still processing everything that had just happened. The bikers were no longer a threat, and she was safe. But the adrenaline was still pumping in her veins. Finally, she spoke. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady. "But this man and his friends need to be held accountable for what they did." The officer nodded. "They will be. Don't worry. You did the right thing standing your ground." Emily looked at the officer, her expression serious. "I didn't do it alone. Rex here made sure I was safe." The officer glanced down at Rex, who was now standing calmly at Emily's side. "You've got one hell of a dog there," he said with a smile. Emily couldn't help but smile in return. "He's not just any dog. He's a retired military canine, and he's been through a lot. He's more than capable of handling a situation like this." The officer nodded, clearly impressed. "It's a good thing you have him with you." He looked over at Jack, who was now being led away by another officer. "We'll take care of things from here. You're free to go." Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her. The situation had been handled, and justice was being served. The bikers would face the consequences of their actions, and Emily could finally breathe again. She turned to Rex, her loyal companion, and gently patted his head. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. Rex wagged his tail, his job done. He had protected Emily, as he always did, and now the threat was gone. As the officers began to process the bikers and take them away, Emily and Rex stood there for a moment longer, watching. The police had handled the situation swiftly, ensuring that the bikers couldn't harm anyone else. But the sense of justice was still fresh in the air. Emily had stood up for herself, and Rex had stood with her. They had both shown strength when it mattered most, and now, the bikers would face the consequences. Finally, the officers finished their work, and one of them came over to Emily. "You're free to go, ma'am. We've got it all under control." Emily nodded, her voice calm. "Thank you." With that, she began to walk away, Rex by her side, leading the way. She didn't need to look back. She knew the bikers were gone, and that they wouldn't be bothering anyone else. The threat had passed, and justice had been served. As Emily walked down the street, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. She had faced down the bikers with strength and confidence, not because she had to fight, but because she had chosen to stand her ground. And Rex, her faithful companion, had stood with her every step of the way. Together, they had faced danger, and together, they had triumphed. It wasn't just the bikers who had learned a lesson today. Emily had learned something too. She had learned that no matter what, she could stand tall, and with Rex by her side, she could face anything that came her way. As the bikers were driven away in the police cars, Emily and Rex remained standing on the side of the street, the sun slowly beginning to dip lower in the sky. The street that had once seemed so full of tension and danger now felt strangely calm. The sound of the police sirens was fading away, and the bustling noises of the city around them returned to their usual rhythm. Emily stood quietly, her hand resting gently on Rex's back. She looked down at her loyal companion, his fur still slightly ruffled from the earlier tension. But now, with everything over, he stood as steady as ever, his eyes calm and focused. She could see the trust in his gaze, a bond that went beyond words. She bent down slightly, her fingers brushing through his fur. "You're more than just a dog, Rex. You're my protector, my friend, and my family. I don't know what I'd do without you." Rex wagged his tail gently, as if he understood the weight of her words. He had always been there for her, guiding her through the world, keeping her safe, and offering her comfort during the times she needed it most. His presence wasn't just a physical help, it was emotional too. There was something powerful about the bond they shared, something that could not be easily explained. It was a partnership built on trust, loyalty, and a shared understanding of the world. Emily straightened up and took a deep breath. The cool evening air felt refreshing against her skin, and for the first time that day, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. The danger had passed, and the bikers had been dealt with. But even more than that, she had stood her ground. She hadn't let them push her around, hadn't allowed them to define her. She had shown them that she was not someone to be overlooked or dismissed. It wasn't always easy for Emily to face the world. As a woman with a disability, she had often been treated as invisible. People would glance past her without a second thought, assuming she needed help without ever asking. She had faced countless moments of frustration, of feeling like she didn't matter, like she was just another person in the background. But today was different. Today, she had refused to let those feelings define her. She had stood tall, both physically and emotionally, and faced the bikers with the strength of her character. It wasn't her cane or her blindness that made her strong, it was her heart. It was the courage inside of her that pushed her forward, even when things felt impossible. Emily had learned something important today. Strength didn't always come in the form of muscles or outward appearances. It wasn't about being the loudest or the most intimidating. Real strength came from within. It came from standing up for yourself, even when others didn't see your worth. It came from knowing that you mattered, no matter how small or overlooked the world might make you feel. She glanced up at the sky, watching as the last rays of the sun painted the horizon in soft hues of orange and pink. It was a beautiful sight, one that reminded her of the simple joys in life. The world was full of challenges, but it was also full of moments like this, moments of peace, of stillness, of beauty. Rex leaned against her leg, resting his head against her knee as if he knew she needed the comfort. Emily smiled down at him, her heart swelling with affection. "You've always been there for me," she whispered. "I couldn't ask for a better friend." She thought about the many times they had faced challenges together. There had been times when she felt unsure of herself, times when the world felt like it was too much to bear. But no matter what, Rex had been there, silent, strong, and steady. He was her constant companion, her protector, and her source of comfort. As Emily began to walk again, Rex leading the way with his steady pace, she realized how far she had come. She had faced a dangerous situation and emerged victorious, not because of luck or chance, but because of the strength she had within herself and the strength of her bond with Rex. In that moment, she knew that true strength wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest in the room. It was about standing firm in who you were, no matter what obstacles came your way. It was about having the courage to face life's challenges head-on, to rise above the negativity, and to hold your head high, even when the world didn't always make it easy. And as she walked down the street, side by side with Rex, she couldn't help but feel proud. Proud of herself, proud of the journey she had taken, and proud of the incredible dog who had been with her every step of the way. Together, they had shown that true strength lies not in how others see you, but in how you see yourself. Sometimes, Emily thought aloud, her voice soft but sure, strength doesn't show on the outside. It's in the loyalty of a dog, and the courage of a woman who refuses to be treated like she's invisible. Rex's tail wagged again, and Emily smiled, knowing that she had made the right choice. She had chosen to face the world with courage, with grace, and with the knowledge that she was never alone. Not as long as Rex was by her side. And as they continued their walk, Emily realized that this wasn't just the end of a single story. It was a reminder of all the ways she had been strong before, and all the ways she would be strong in the future. She had faced adversity, and with Rex by her side, she had overcome it. And there was nothing, no challenge, no obstacle, that could ever take away her strength. In that quiet moment, walking through the streets with her loyal companion, Emily knew one thing for certain: no matter what life threw at her, she would never back down. She was strong. She was brave. And she was worthy of every step she took in this world.